okay? All right, so let's get started. Like I said, Monday we talked about honoring your hunger. So eating when you're hungry is a good way to prevent overeating, right? Because if we get to an overly ravenous state, what happens is we're going to want to eat way more. We tune out, and then we completely bypass our fullness signals. Okay, so we'll talk today about how to recognize your fullness signals, but one way to, again, like be prepared and be proactive and just avoid this in the first place is eating when you're hungry, right? That's what we talked about on Monday. Because this way, if we're not overly ravenous when we're about to eat a meal or a snack, then we won't just be blowing past any feelings of fullness, okay? So how to know when to stop eating. So I view hunger kind of on a continuum, like a hunger scale. So it goes from 0 or 1 to 10, okay? So 0 is like you're running on empty, okay? Or 1, you know, that the very low end of the scale is like you are starving. You are absolutely like ready to eat everything in sight, okay? You're absolutely starving at a 0 or a 1. So then as we go up the scale, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, I'm starting to feel like a little bit satisfied, a little bit full. Once you get like past 5, you're like into the 6, 7, you're like, I know I'm gonna need to stop eating soon, right? Because if we get into like 8, 9, 10, it's like we are physically uncomfortable, right? Once you reach a 10, it's like too late. Your belly's about to pop like a balloon, right? And you feel physical discomfort. You feel like you're in a food coma and you have to go to sleep, right? So this is what we want to avoid, because we don't want to feel physical discomfort, right? We want the food that we eat to make us feel energized and comfortable, right? We want it to satisfy us and fuel us, and we want to have this really positive relationship with food. But if we overeat and we let ourselves get to the point of physical discomfort, it becomes harder and harder to have a really positive relationship with food, okay? So keep in mind that scale today, that 0 to 10 scale, 0 being I'm so hungry, just crazy, like blindingly hungry, to 10 being like I am so full, like I feel like I need to like go to the hospital or something, right? You're like extremely uncomfortable. So you probably know like what varying levels of this scale feel like, right? You've probably been there. But so it's like, why do we keep eating when we know we're going to be reaching like an 8, 9, or a 10? Why do we keep eating? There are a lot of reasons. A, like the food might taste amazing, okay? But another reason that we keep eating that I think like we don't talk about a lot is like when you're done eating, that's a moment of sadness, right? Like I think we just need to like acknowledge that when we stop eating, it's sad. We love eating, right? We take pleasure in our food. This is how it should be. And a lot of times eating is a break for us, like especially if we get to really stop working, sit down and have a lunch break, or even like meal times at dinner, right? If that's a break for you, then when that ends, that means that you have to go and do work potentially, or you have to go face something else in your day, right? So it's no wonder that we want to keep eating, because it tastes good, right? We know that when we're done eating, we're going to feel sad. We might even feel deprived, okay? So we don't want the moment to come where we have to stop eating. So that is one reason that people will continue to eat, even though they know like maybe they're not necessarily eating out of hunger anymore. And then of course, like if you're habitually eating when you're not hungry, this becomes emotional eating territory, right? So maybe you keep eating past the point, you know, where you're already full and you keep eating, you overeat because you're eating to fill an unmet need, to meet an unmet need, or, you know, you're eating to fill a void or to cover up some type of uncomfortable emotion, right? You are eating because you don't want to have to face a negative emotion. So that's just another reason that people might overeat, right, is emotional eating. So one thing I like to say about that moment where we have to stop eating and we feel, a lot of times we feel sad or deprived, you know, and one positive way to look at it is like, if you stop eating, like if you stop eating when you're at like maybe a 5 or a 6, even a 7, you get to eat again in like 3 hours. You get to eat again in like 2 to 4 hours, let's say, right? It just depends on the satiety of your food, the feeling of fullness, how much is actually filling you up. And it depends on how fast your metabolism is, how fast it's gonna work through that food. But if you aren't eating, like if you're eating to a 10, you're not gonna be hungry enough to eat again in 3 or 4 hours, right? So you're gonna feel that sadness with no real light at the end of the tunnel, right? But if you don't overeat, right, if you don't let yourself reach that 10 on the fullness scale, then you know that you get to eat again in 3 or 4 hours. So I will give you a personal example because I think this might illustrate my point and be a little bit helpful to you. So my boyfriend, Sam, he is from Brazil, and he just like has exposed me to a lot of wonderful foods, okay? But one of my favorite foods that he has exposed me to is like a very American like sandwich. It's like Italian or like French or white bread or whatever, and it's just like a cold cut like meat, lettuce, tomato, like cheese. So like it's something I've had before in theory, but it's special because this is a sandwich that before Sam met me, he would eat this meal when he was out on the boat with his friends, right? With his boss and his boss's family, and just, this was boat food. So we started dating, and he introduced me to this sandwich because we were about to go out on the boat, and he was like, this is what we always take on the boat, right? So I've had the sandwich like a couple times, and so I associate it with like summer and the boat, right? Just like he does. And so I don't eat sandwiches a lot. It's just like not, we can't really keep bread in the house. There's only 2 of us. Like, so it's just going to go bad. Like, it's just not really something that we do for no particular reason. But one day, I think it was Memorial Day weekend, like a couple weeks ago, we decided to make these sandwiches. We weren't going out on the boat, but we still decided to make the sandwiches. You guys, it was so good. It was so good. And we sat out on the patio. It's like this beautiful Tennessee summer day. Just my dream come true. Just like sitting there with my man, like this weather is incredible. I'm such a summer person, right? It was like all of my favorite things, this amazing sandwich. And so I told Sam, I was like, I'm gonna be sad when this sandwich is over. Like, I was like, I'm gonna be sad. Like, I want to eat it so slow. And I did. I ate it so slow, and I really like just enjoyed every bite. But I think what helped me was I was like, this food is always available to me. Like, I can have another sandwich again in 3 hours if I want to. And I did, by the way. It's so good still. But if I had had 2 sandwiches, right? If I was like, this is so good. Like, I just want to keep having this amazing like sensation, this sensual experience. If I had had 2, then I would have gotten to the point on my hunger scale of like a 10, and I wouldn't have wanted to eat the rest of the day. So it's like, it really kind of taints the experience, right? If you overdo it. So one thing that helped me that you can borrow that I hope is helpful to you is knowing like, I can have another one of these in 3 hours if I want to. If the food is that good, right? And it's like very special, just know that like that's not the only time that you can have it. So you don't have to overdo it. You don't have to overdo it. And then also, like, one of the pillars that I believe in, that I teach my clients, is these foods are always available to you. You never have to say no to these foods, okay? So sometimes we have special foods. I told you that this sandwich is like summer food. It's boat food for Sam and for me. But we can have it whenever we want, right? Like, Sam says we're the bosses. That's something that he says a lot. we don't have, we make our own food rules, right? We make our own food rules. And so we can have that whenever we want, right? Nobody can tell us that we can't have that. But sometimes we want to keep things special so that they maintain that special air about them. Like, for example, like birthday cake, right? If you ate birthday cake every single day of the year, then when it came time for your birthday or somebody's birthday, it's like not as special anymore. So that's a decision that you have to make, right? It's, do I want to keep this food special? So do I want to only eat it once a year because I really want it to be special? Or am I going to obsess over that food? if I only get to have it once a year? And if when I have it, am I going to just absolutely overdo it? Am I going to way overdo it, right? Overdoing it can look like a couple things. It can look like eating really fast, eating a ton of whatever it is. It can look like eating in secret, right? So you have to make that decision, and you can take it food by food. But one thing you do is, it's called habituation, right? If you have a food that you are feeling that like you're obsessed with, that you can't control yourself around, if you have a food or a food group that you feel like you can't control yourself around, one thing we need to do is habituate that food. It's kind of like exposure therapy, right? So we have to allow ourselves to have that food until it no longer has power over us, and until we no longer fear it. This is a very scary thing to do, but it cures you, and it cures you forever. And that is why in my program, I offer my clients a permanent solution. No exaggeration. I offer them a permanent transformation, a lasting solution to their problem. Because once we can do this, right? Once we can eliminate all of the power and the fear that food has, you don't have to do it ever again, right? It's just this whole mindset shift. So it's knowing that foods are always available to you. And so you might need to do one of two things, okay? So like for me with the sandwich, I can do one of two things. I can continue to have sandwiches more often because I realize that I love that sandwich, and I don't want to be like overdoing it, right? Whenever I do get to have it. Or I can be like, this is bulk food, or this is like summer food, or this is birthday food, right? And I can decide, but I'm making the conscious choice of whether or not I want to keep it a special food. And if I'm keeping it a special food, then I also have to kind of have an agreement with myself that that means that I'm not going to overdo it when I get that special food, okay? So anyway, I would like to pivot now to another idea, and you guys can just kind of pick and choose which ideas are helpful to you today that are going to help you to not overeat in the future. Here's another thought for you, is you do not have to clean your plate. You are not obligated to eat all of the food in front of you, okay? Now, this might rub some of you the wrong way, so just let me explain. So a lot of us are raised, we're being taught as kids, like clean your plate or else you don't get dessert, right? Clean your plate or else you don't get to play outside. Very well-meaning parents will teach this, right? They'll say clean your plate because they want us to grow big and strong and get lots of, vegetables or whatever's on the plate, right? They want us to eat it all. This can be a damaging message though, because then that becomes these kids turn into adults who habitually clean their plates. And what happens when you're cleaning your plate is you're going on autopilot. You've become so accustomed to eating all of the food that's in front of you without even thinking about it, that you go into autopilot. And so are you even recognizing where you're at on the fullness scale? Are you just eating out of habit? Are you just eating then the full plate out of habit? You don't have to do that, okay? You have a lot of options when it comes to this. And I guess a side note about kids are really good examples of honoring their intuition. They're a really good example of like showing you that they know their bodies, and we need to trust that kids are going to be able to balance out their bodies over time. And adults are no exception, right? None of us are going to go weeks on end with just candy without getting a bellyache. Similarly, none of us are going to go weeks on end with just broccoli without feeling like something's missing, okay? So I think we are afraid that we're gonna just like, it's gonna be no holds barred, right? I think we're afraid to do this with kids because we're like, they won't be able to control themselves. But if you watch, kids will tell you when they're hungry and they'll stop eating when they're full, and yet they always seem to get enough of what they need. okay? And we're the same. It's intuition. It's amazing. But we try to create all of these rules around how and when we're eating, and it's gotten so out of control. So I'm here not to make it more complicated, but to do what's called subtractive psychology, where we eliminate the things we don't need. We have to get rid of some of these crazy food rules because they're consuming you, they're overwhelming you, they're not serving you, they're creating problems, okay? So one of the food rules that I'm challenging today is you have to clean your plate. You don't. What is more respectful to your body is if you're able to tune in to when you're actually full, and then you can stop eating, okay? So what we can do is package up leftovers, right? And if you are a person who's like, I hate eating leftovers, then either like get over it and be a grown-up, or B, give it to a homeless person on the street. But either way, okay, if you're concerned about respecting economics and you're hyper aware of food waste, either way, hate to break it to you, it becomes an issue of waste. Okay? So either, let's say you throw the food away. It's waste, W-A-S-T-E. Say you eat the food past the point that you're full, past the point that you really need it to satisfy you. It becomes an issue of waste, W-A-I-S-T. Putting extra food into your body becomes putting extra weight on your body over time that you really don't need to be there in order for you to be healthy. Okay, so either way, not the best use of our food. So I think another thing that can help us to recognize our comfortable level of fullness, or that feeling of satiety, is if we take a time out during our meal, okay? So we can take a time out and we can know that we're not obligated one way or the other. So what this might look like is I'm about halfway through my meal and I just like take a big deep breath and decide, like, if I wait a little bit, like, am I gonna feel really full? Or like, do I need to keep eating, right? You just kind of make a decision in that moment, but you're not obligated either way. You can keep eating or you can stop eating. But just check in with yourself so that you're not blowing through the whole plate before you even realize what you did there. Okay, so taking a time out can be an effective practice if you want to become more mindful and if you want to do more conscious eating, right? Conscious eating is a great way to combat overeating, all right? And then once you do decide to stop, a quick tip is you can come up with a way that feels good to you to reinforce your decision to stop, okay? So one way some people do this is they push their plate away, just like push it away from their body a little bit, and that signifies to them it's the end of the meal, I'm done. Some people like to put their silverware on top of their plate and then put their napkin on top of their plate, and then that signifies to them that it's the end of the meal and they're done. So for some people, depending on your situation, it could be getting up, physically removing yourself. So even if there's still food left on the plate, like you've made the point to yourself and maybe to the people around you, you're done, you're satisfied, okay? So is this helpful to you guys at all? Is this information helpful? Can you give me some feedback? Let me know if any of this is resonating with you. Because I want to know that I'm explaining myself in a way that's giving you guys what you need today, okay? And then the other thing we really need to do to combat overeating is to stand up for ourselves, okay? So we need to defend ourselves against food pushers, against people who, again, probably very well-meaning people who are offering you food when you're not hungry, okay? My grandma, bless her heart, does this all the time, and she gets personally offended if we don't eat her food. Love you, Gran. She does have a Facebook, so she could be on here. But the thing is, like, if we are so used to complying and we feel a sense of obligation to eat because it would be impolite not to, how is that teaching us to tune into our own bodies, respect our own bodies? Like, that's putting somebody else's needs in front of your own so that they're more comfortable. And then that makes you uncomfortable, right? So either way, someone's gonna be uncomfortable, because you're either gonna be eating when you're not hungry and then your belly gets uncomfortable, or they're gonna be offended or whatever it is, but that's their issue. Let them deal with that. So you do not need to, you don't need to say yes to all the food pushers out there, okay? And this happens too, like when you're at a party, you know, a cocktail waitress comes by and it's like, if they're, you know, you pick up the little foods. If you're not actually hungry, like, don't feel socially obligated to eat, okay? Because this is, again, just what makes us really uncomfortable. So I'm getting close to time to wrapping up here. So shoot me your questions, and then I'll give you just a couple more tidbits of information here if nobody has questions today. Monday, last lesson, we discussed the importance of macronutrients, okay? So macros are carbs, fats, and proteins. And the reason it is wise to incorporate macros at all your snacks and your meals is because it really does contribute to that feeling of fullness, okay? And it contributes to that feeling of satisfaction and satiety. But guess what? Satisfaction is a whole other topic that we're going to cover on Friday, same time, okay? Because we need to feel like we're actually satisfied with our food in order to not keep eating, okay? So this idea of macros is going to keep coming up. It's going to come up again on Friday. But I wanted to encourage you, if you feel, you know, in order to feel full, you might want to think about balancing your plate with the 3 macros with some fiber, okay? And then beware of like filler foods, like air foods, because you could be eating a lot of them without actually like feeling satisfied, right? Or feeling full. So this would be like anything that's marketed as like low calorie or fat free, right? Like these are kind of foods that we want to stay away from. But again, like this is going to be another topic. You want to be reading ingredients and stuff like that are going to be more important. But I'm also not here to like give you huge lessons on nutrition, because the fact of the matter is like so many other things need to go into our food choices. Nutrition is important, but it's only one aspect of why we eat, what we eat, and all of those things, okay? But of course, you know, we just have to we have to be willing to meet ourselves somewhere in the middle, knowing that we're not always going to have perfect nutrition. But you know, it's so interesting. And I told a couple of my clients this week, I see Jenny on here, told her this week, one of the most interesting things that I like to share is in the Intuitive Eating Handbook that was written like 30 years ago. This system has been proven, backed by science over and over and over and over again, okay? In this handbook, it's written by 2 registered dietitians, and they place variety in the same category as macronutrients. So they say our bodies need fats, proteins, carbs, and variety. Same category, okay? So we create a lot of drama, though, around that variety piece, right? And it doesn't feel as neutral to us. So be comfortable with the fact that your body's going to crave a lot of different things. Your body's going to need a lot of different foods over time, and that's healthy and that's normal, okay? So let's recap. Today, we talked about that hunger to fullness scale, right? We talked about the 0 to 10, and how to start recognizing when we're moving up the scale, right? Maybe taking a time out, engaging in some more mindful eating. Another way to engage in mindful eating is to eliminate distractions, right? So maybe not reading something or watching TV or working through your meals. And we talked about how to stand up for yourself against food pushers. We discussed macros again, and we discussed like kind of the decisions that you might want to start making about, is this a special food or is this a food that I need to habituate, right? Why is this a food that I get obsessed about or that I overdo it with? All right. So if you guys have questions on any of that stuff, just let me know. I'll be back on Friday, same time, and we're going to talk about the satisfaction factor. Okay. Why is it important that we even feel satisfied with our food? And then what are all the nuances to that, right? How can we increase our satisfaction? All of the things. Okay. So it was a real pleasure having you guys on this training. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, shoot me your questions. And I'll see you Friday. Have a great Wednesday.